Hey everyone, Happy New Year first and foremost. This week's tip video, we're going to be talking about suspending jerkbaits and a brand that you should want to carry alongside and in the event that you need a substitute of those more expensive jerkbaits. The Dynamic Lures lineup of suspending jerkbaits has accounted for several trophy smallmouth bass that have been captured in the last decade, including some of my personal best, which are fish surpassing 6.5 to 7 pounds. So in 2013, the first jerkbait that they released was the J-Spec. It's a 3.5-inch suspending jerkbait, best suitable for spinning setups. And in the last year, they've released a supersized version, which is a 4-inch model, and that is the Z-Spec. The Dynamic Lures lineup of suspending jerkbaits, they don't break the bank. On average, they retail $6.99 to $8.99 depending on where you get them from. They're a great alternative to the more expensive suspending jerkbaits out there. Nowadays, everything is over $10 a piece. Some of the more expensive baits, they're going to be ranging anywhere from $20 to $30. You don't need expensive baits to catch big fish. And what we're going to showcase this week is the big fish that Dynamic Lures produces for my boat. There's a ton that we can discuss about today between both of these baits. The J-Spec, as I mentioned, 3-inch model, the Z-Spec 4-inch. Where I tend to use these a lot is during spring and fall season. So during the month of May, immediately after ice out, whenever that can be. Some years it's end of April, other years it's your typical first 2 weeks of May. But all throughout the month of May, we're rocking the 3-inch J-Specs. And these are awesome cutter style jerkbaits. They do suspend. They are non-risers, so you have nothing to worry about as far as baits hanging and then rising upward. They don't do that. Some models, if you do get lucky, they do tend to sink a little bit, so that is an aid if you're targeting fish that are more wary. They spook more, they hold a little deeper, and they're less active. So that's some of the benefits between the J-Spec. Out of the package, the hook quality is actually fairly good. There's no need to change out the hooks. In the last year, Dynamic Lures, they've actually upgraded their hooks. So originally, 5 to 10 years ago, you'd open up a package, you need to swap hooks out immediately. Nowadays, that is not the case anymore. They finally listened to us, and the hooks are actually much larger now than they used to be, and they're very sharp as well. But out of the package, these things are ready to catch fish. You're not going to have to do any mass tuning. But what I do like to do as a modification to all of my suspending jerkbaits, even in, this is typical of any brand, the X-Wrap obviously that comes with the teaser tail with the hook rear treble hook dressing. What I've done with the J-Specs here is we add our own tails just to give it a bit more of a attraction. Any fish early season that might be trailing your bait, as you retrieve it, this could help tempt them into striking. So it's all for attraction, making your bait a little bit more enticing, and I do recommend making your own trailer hooks. Either you can tie them up yourself or just hook up with any fly angler, give them your trebles, and they can concoct it for you. And that's what we've done. J-Spec has a diving depth of anywhere from 1 to 4 feet. My recommendation is if you can fish this with spinning gear, I opt for a 7-foot medium heavy fast spinning setup spool with 8-pound mono. And that line combination along with the medium heavy action, it's going to be able to make the bait dive down so it can cut even deeper, and you'll be able to get an even greater diving depth. So depending on how far you can cast out, I can tend to average anywhere from 3 to 6 feet just based on my line choice as well as the rod length and being able to make very long casts. But the J-Spec, it weighs slightly more than 1/4 ounce, so you can certainly get it out there. I recommend always fishing this with a spinning setup. The J-Spec is a good bait to have alongside of all of your other typical spring pre-spawn suspending jerkbaits. A big popular one for me in my boat at all times is the Rapala X-Wrap in sizes 8 and 10, but the J-Spec, I always use it as an alternative. The X-Wrap has more limitations, I feel, as far as diving depth, but where that bait excels in is as a slash bait and cut bait. So, you know, it can cut it doesn't dive, but it cuts more and it produces a lot more action. Whereas the J-Spec, as you can tell, it has a much longer lip. The lip shape, it promotes diving depth, so that's where the benefit in this bait stands out. You can make them dive, whereas the X-Wrap and all your other typical suspending jerk baits of spring, whatever you guys might throw, they're going to be cutting, they'll be dancing oddly. This one's a great cut and diving bait. Dynamic Lures makes some very good color combinations. What's nice about it is high detail, very good color selections. The J-Spec is currently offered in about 15 different colors, so a couple of these actually stand out for me. First and foremost, Ghost Minnow. This is their original color from back in 2013. I really like this one on all of your clear water minnow type of forage lakes. So wherever Cisco's or smelt are present, this is one of my go-tos. The next one that I do like to fish a lot in early spring is Clown. This one excels in stained water as well as in clear water types. And it does have a very nice contrast between the upper chartreuse, the red face, and then the very bottom translucency. This one up here is called Cutthroat. I'm not sure if this one is still in existence, but a couple years ago this one came out, and where this one really works well for me is on lakes that have a lot of log perch. Log perch is a favorite of smallmouths in early season, and a lot of inland natural lakes have that forage available, and that is what smallmouths really like to target during the month of May, right before yellow perch and other bait fish become a little bit more common. So log perch, they like to invade the shallows in May, and they're going to spawn in the shallow shoreline areas as well, and this is where Cutthroat really excels for me. In those shallow areas, it's a very good replicant of the log perch. And then lastly, this one is Goby. I found a lot of success with this one on the big, deep, clearer lakes. Now, gobies do not exist in Northwoods inland lakes, but what we do have a lot of are sculpins, and this really replicates sculpin very well. So the J-Specs are constructed very well. They're very durable baits. Very loud rattle chamber, as you can see through this clown pattern. You can see the rattles that are inserted on the inside. They did not cut any corners with the rattle system. Shake it, it's very loud. The durability is excellent. Hard plastic construction. I actually have never had issues with pike or toothy critters demolish these. It's been very common actually for baits to fall apart or to crack, especially the Rapala brand. I've had issues with X-Wraps in the past and with shadow wraps in which a toothy, such as a pike or muskie, they T-bone this bait, it's mangled, you have to extract the bait out with pliers, and what happens in the process, the treble, the hook system, it'll get all mangled, and then in the process you open up the bait and then it starts to split in half and then it becomes waterlogged. I've actually never had that issue with these baits ever before, so the construction is very durable, and over the years we've caught plenty of pike and walleyes on these same baits, and they withstand all the abuse. The J-Specs retail for $7.99. They're an outstanding value, and they are a phenomenal alternative. If the X-Wrap for some reason isn't cutting it for you, you want to use a bait that can dive a little bit deeper. It'll maintain a more compact type of retrieve style, and it can also hang and get down much deeper in comparison. So this is a great bait that you're not going to want to omit from your lure selection and from your arsenal in the spring season. Check them out. In comparison to the J-Spec, which is more of a favorite of mine during the spring season, as the year goes on, your forage, it's going to grow larger in size too. So by the end of the year, during September and October months, instead of throwing those itty-bitty 3-inch baits, what we do is we tend to throw a lot more larger sizes, which could be 4 and even 5-inch baits. But for end of year smallmouths, for that late summer to fall transition time, which is awesome for jerkbait fishing, what I like to throw a lot of is the 4-inch Z-Spec. The Z-Specs were released in 2022. We tested these very extensively from 2020 into 2021. I was the recipient of a couple of prototypes, and those baits did not make the cut. We had issues with diving and cutting. The lip shape in the initial design had a bunch of flaws. So right before 2022 came about, we finally finalized it, and we came with the current form. The Z-Spec has a lot of the same properties and characteristics as the J-Spec. The only difference is a major difference in diving depth. The J-Spec will dive based upon the gear recommendations that I've given. It'll dive anywhere from 3 to 6 feet, whereas the Z-Spec, even if you're fishing with fluorocarbon line, which I do almost exclusively with any suspending jerkbait, at most I can only get 2 to 4 feet of diving depth. But where this bait really excels is with that side-to-side action. It does like to dance a lot of movement. So depending on how you can flick your wrist and get your bait to work with a bait casting setup, you can get this thing to dance, and it moves side to side very quickly. So it's a phenomenal search bait. It's great when smallmouths are more focused on a minnow bite on their pelagic species, or even if they're focusing on yellow perch. The color choices, unfortunately, are more limited with the Z-Spec. What I'm dying to have is perch patterns in this, but for now we've only started with ghost minnow, sexy shad, and then black silver. You know, your typical black silver minnow, but that's all we have thus far. Out of the package, couple flaws instantly, but very correctable. The hooks are a bit on the small side, and what I've done with this one is one of my recommendations always, check the hooks first. If you're noticing that the hooks aren't wider than the bait, my first recommendation always is to swap the hooks, and that's what I had to do. This one has my modified hooks, the TK300 by Trocar. This bait, the ghost minnow, has the original factory hooks on it. While suitable, I favor more larger and wider hooks, just mainly for being able to stick more fish that might nudge the bait and might not be fully committed. So the construction of the Z-Spec, it's actually far more durable and much more advanced and improved rather than the J-Spec. So you saw in the previous clip how the J-Spec here, it's basically in 2 halves, solid plastic construction. The Z-Spec in comparison has 0 ridge lines, and it is a full body construction. So it's not created in 2 halves and then fused together like a lot of your other hard plastic construction jerkbaits are made. This one, fully solid. It's never gonna leak. It probably will never break. High durability. And this is very unique, I feel, for any suspending jerkbait and minnow bait. You can see right here on the finish, there is nothing that would indicate that this bait is constructed in 2 halves and then fused together like pretty much every hard plastic body mold out there is made. So where I like to fish the Z-Spec, while it has caught some fish during spring pre-spawn season, where I really like to fish these a lot is from that late summer to early fall transition period. At that point in the year, our water temps are cooling, so a lot of big smallmouth, they're pushing back into the shallows. They're going to be hanging around weed lines on the edges of flats, waiting for perch and other passerby forage species to be moving through, and these excel during that time frame. Water temps in the 70 to 60 degree range. Very high action packed, high activity time of year, and that's when you're going to want to be throwing the Z-Spec. So for the longest time, Dynamic Lures, they only relied on that 3-inch J-Spec, and due to the requests from anglers such as myself and others, we finally made it happen with this 4-inch bait. The retail on these is $8.99. Doesn't break the bank. Totally awesome. So for all reasons mentioned, these are baits that you're going to want to have in your arsenal for your suspended jerkbait fishing for pre-spawn smallmouths or else any other time of the year. They don't break the bank. Durability is outstanding. The rattle system, excellent. The construction, rock solid. Colorways adequate. The J-Spec far better than the Z-Spec. These baits have a lot to offer. Retailing at $7.99. and at $8.99. You can't beat that price. So give this small company in Colorado your support, Dynamic Lures. Visit them online at dynamiclures.com.